All right, Lions fans, let's talk. I want to do a contrast of foundations between the past two regimes. The Quinn Patricia regime, as well as I guess you could say the Quinn Cardwell slash Patricia regime, maybe, as well as the Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell regime. First off, we're going to start off with what they had to build off of when they first got offered the job, or when they first took the job. What did they have to build off with as a foundation? Like, what was the leader or leaders on offense and defense? And we're going to build off of that. On offense for Quinn and Patricia, he had Matthew Stafford. Uh, he didn't have Calvin Johnson and so forth. He just had as his leader per se that is going to come go to work, and I guess the piece that you could build off of. Matt Stafford, right? And in contrast to that, uh, Brad Holmes has Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hawkinson, and DeAndre Swift. That's on offense. Of course, you can include Taylor Decker too, right? We're gonna add Decker to what Brad Holmes had to build off of. And while we're doing this, and the point of doing this is to show what each regime had, what they had to build off of, and how successful they truly were or truly are. When a foundation is freshly built, they and let me use an example in the NBA of the NBA. When they would say the argument goes on who's the greatest basketball player of all time as an individual, not the greatest team, but the greatest ball player. And the argument always comes down to maybe two players to three. It depends on how old. I would say how the age range of those who are discussing who is whatever, who is the best. And it goes back to recently Michael Jordan and LeBron James, right? And maybe you could throw in a third with Kobe Bryant, right? But when I'm talking about when discussion is always talked about, Michael Jordan is always thrown in as the greatest for what he has accomplished or what was notarized, what his Kyle's accomplished was notarized and so forth, right? But let's go back to his coaching as far as like with the Chicago Bulls, and they would arguably say that well, Phil Jackson is one of the greatest coaches of all time. Of course, maybe second to um, Red Auerbach, and maybe a close third. You got Greg Popovich, right? So when it comes to Phil Jackson, there was a stigma name on his reputation that he can get you a championship if it's built, but in terms of him building a championship, building a championship team, that's not his skill set. So, in other words, with Phil Jackson, the team has to be assembled for him to actually do what he does best, right? And I bring that up to make that in comparison to the Detroit Lions of their two regime. The question that I'm going to present is it easier to build off of something that's already established or to reconstruct everything and build? So this is where I have always been cited towards Bob Quinn as the Lions' greatest general manager post Super Bowl era. Anything before the Super Bowl era, not post, yeah, post Super Bowl era. Anything prior to the Super Bowl era, that's a totally different breed of a discussion. Some people will say that is the general manager that drafted Barry Sanders and so forth and da 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 da. I totally disagree. But anyway, but that's another topic. But right now we're going to talk about Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia era versus Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell's, whatever. We're not talking about coaching. We're not talking about, I guess, symbolizing a staff per se. But we're going to talk about just what they had to build off with. We're not going to talk about the upper management. If we do, it's going to hopefully it will be light, a light discussion about it. So when Bob Quinn took over as the general manager, of course, he was replacing Mayhew, right? When he came in, he inherited his team on the offense side of the ball. The only thing he had to build off of was Matthew Stafford. Excuse me. Now, some may argue. I mean, some may have the. I won't say argue, but some may have the whole debate about. Well, I guess you could say argue. If Bob Quinn wanted Matthew Stafford here or not, versus they were handcuffed to Matthew Stafford. I don't believe Matthew Stafford was that type of guy. But I believe that they were Bob Quinn, how he is, that I'll take what you give me and I'll roll with it, right? So he's building off Matthew Stafford. Now, with that Matthew Stafford on offense, where's your running back? Where's your tight end? Where's your receivers? I believe you inherit Marvin Jones. I believe I'll go with that. All right. I'll give you Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones. I forgot about Marvin Jones. Okay, you got Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones as your offensive guys, right? To build off of. Now, that's what you're going to go to war with as your leaders. Now, I'm talking about for 16 games, you're going to go with the war on your offense as those are your best two players. Otherwise, your offensive line is built off of TJ Lang, maybe Wagner. No. He brought that in up under Bob Quinn brought that in up under Cardwell. So actually, they were not here. I don't even know who with their offensive line. I'm going off of memory. I'm not going off of. I'm not Googling anything or looking up anything, researching anything. I'm just going off of memory. So he had Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones. That's on offense. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell inherit Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, Taylor Decker as his foundation pieces on offense. Those are your mainstays, your go-tos, right? We're not talking about we're talking about these are your bona fide leaders, not just in the film study, the walkthroughs, not just in practice. This is I guess you say Monday through Sunday. These are your leaders. T.J. Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker. Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia inherit Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones. That's on offense. Now let's discuss the defense side of the ball. On the defense, no. Before we go on the defense, the first acquisition that I believe that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia inquired was on defense. No, forgive me. To continue the offense was Taylor Decker and Glasgow. From my understanding, that was their first two picks of a draft on the offensive side of the ball. Decker, Glasgow. So they was building up the trenches. We understand how Glasgow turned out. We definitely know how Taylor Decker turned out. Now, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, on their offensive side of the ball, he went with he finished the deal on the offensive line. He got Penny Sewell, or Penei Sewell, whichever how you want to do it. And of course, you could throw in the latter pick. He got Ramon St. Brown and uh, maybe G- Jeffrey. I'm drawing a blank. In the seventh round, predominantly he went defense because he offensively, Brad Holmes didn't have much to fill in on offense. The offense was pretty much complete based upon what Quinn, well, but let's say that what based upon what Quinn was building off of Matthew Stafford. He built the offensive line around Matthew Stafford. He built the running game off of Matthew Stafford. He built a tight end off of Matthew Stafford. He built all this off of Matthew Stafford. Right? He has something to build off of, and he built off that. Now, Brad Holmes come in, and he's building off what Quinn has already established, but yet and still we're going to go by what he has to build off of what was already in place. He had Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, Taylor Decker. That's one heck of a foundation to build off of. And I would throw in the Halapoulivaati Vitae. He gets a bad reputation for, how can I say it? He gets a bad reputation for an incompletion. In other words, his first year, he wasn't able to do anything. You know, I don't know how long this is going on to his second year, I believe. Maybe his third year. I'm not sure. I believe it's his second year. His first year with the Lions that he was injured, came in injured rather. And when he got healthy, the offensive line was shuffling around because there was a lot of injuries. And yeah, I think last year was his first year. So he got a bad reputation off of, you could say, what's it? Is it called DNPs? Did not perform, or incompletions, INC. But nonetheless, Brad Holmes is building off of Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, Taylor Decker. I'm going to say this, going on the record, those four pieces is either going to be all pros this year or they're going to be Pro Bowlers. Frank Ragnow, T.J. Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, Taylor Decker. Now, when Brad Holmes did his first drafting of the offense, he just did what? He just completed the work. Even if let's say, for example, even if the trade have never happened with the Matthew Stafford, and we could touch on that briefly, what he did in his drafting, Penny Sewell, he finished off the offensive line, right? He didn't do anything different that I don't think anyone, maybe with a right mind in that position, wouldn't have done, is particularly if that caliber of a player fell to you. If that caliber of a player fell to you. Now, we're not talking about what he did in the second and third rounds, and we're talking about that first round pick, the seventh overall. What fell to you is a no-brainer. You take it. That's the best player on the board, and it fills a need. You take it. That's not rocket science. That's an automatic. You know what? I wouldn't even consider that an A plus. I consider that as, that's not something that you grade, but I guess you kind of sort of have to. So that's an A plus because you get the best player on the board, the best player on the board, the best player at their position on the board, and you're also getting the best player that you need at a position of need. So it's an automatic. There's no way that pick can get a low grade because it fills three areas. It's the best player available. It's the best player that you need, and is the best player at the position. I don't understand how you can get anything less than an A or A plus. I don't understand that. But anyway, he closed off the deal with that. That's on the offensive side of the ball. But even if you let's say for example, and I'm going to gripe on something real quick on a rant about the golf Matthew Stafford trade. Now I argue, of course, I truly believe that Matthew Stafford wouldn't have been traded if he didn't request to get traded, which I believe is going to be a mistake on Stafford. The first, you know what, I almost want to say it's a bittersweet deal because I can see him actually winning the Super Bowl with what's the name if he take the next step of himself, which is what I wanted him to do here. But he stayed in the same comfortable spot. He never really grew. He he tapped his foot in the water of maturing his game, but he never really grew to the stature where versus talking about he went from the guy that they would say Matthew Stafford you could be considered a candidate for the MVP. So well, okay, I guess that's good, whatever. Then he came to the place of, well, yeah, I should be listed as the MVP, as a candidate as an MVP. But he never did his job as an MVP. He can't do anything about a pass catcher catching the ball. He can't do anything about that. Correction. The only thing he can do about a pass catcher catching the ball is putting the ball where it's accurately placed for them to make the best catch or the best opportunity to catch the ball. That's the best Stafford can do. He can't, and of course you're talking about that goes along with him being protected on the offensive line, but that offensive line that last year, we're going off of last year. When you're going off of Taylor Decker, Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow. Let's say Decker and Ragnow, just that alone. And of course, you could throw Halapuli Vitae, you could throw in Crosby and all the rest of that. The offensive line was serviceable enough for Stafford to be able to throw an accurate pass or to throw a pass in stride or, in terms of pass catching. He was in a perfect position for him to be able to be a more efficient quarterback. Now, he can't do anything about Matt Patricia or his scheme or Matt Patricia and this. He can't do anything about that. The only thing he can do about what he can control, how he places the ball. If he's going to throw the ball too hot, if he's going to throw it too soft, if he's going to loft it, if he's going to, lob it, he can control all that. That's all within him. Even within the pressure of the offensive line not doing their job. Now, a person may say that, well, he can't do his job unless somebody else do their job. And that's the emphasis that Matt Patricia was trying to put the spin on the team. Just do your job. Matt Patricia couldn't do his job because let's say, for example, if the players don't do what they're told by their position coach, Matt Patricia can't do his job by overseeing because he has to make adjustments to this. It was a mess. It's a mess. And then people say that's culture fit. Oh, that's based upon, the identity of the coach. You don't have players that want to play for you and all that good stuff. But if you don't have much to build off with, if you don't have much to play off of, if you got to go by what you inherited, which when they came into it, he had Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones. Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones, are any one of them at the top of their position? Let's say top 10 at their position. Either one of them. No. So I'm not talking about stats. I'm talking about just their play, their efficiency. Just efficiency. You can give me a guy that doesn't get all the stats, but that is just efficient at what they do. That doesn't make everything harder for the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Doesn't make everything harder for, I guess, say, the position leaders or the assistants and head coaches. He just make their job a whole lot easier. They're not the very best at what they do, but they're very efficient at what they do. So it's equivalent to if you have instead of going to the construction field, you have a regular carpenter, you have a finished carpenter, right? A finished carpenter basically dots the I's, cross the T's. He makes everything look nice and tight, right? He put the molding trim down, he does this, and all that, right? But he doesn't really he can do the framing work of the foundation, the building of the structures and so forth. He can do that, but the finished carpenter is the finished carpenter. He basically closes out the deal. You're not asking the finished carpenter. If you're hiring a finished carpenter, you're not asking him to do the plumbing work. You're not asking him to do anything else but just what he does. And he has one job to do, is to do what he does at a very efficient level. So when they came in here, they came in with Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones. Are they efficient at what they do? And what I mean by efficiency, is it efficient enough that you can build off of? Like they will be building blocks. Not something like building blocks that for years they built off of Backus and Raiola on the offensive line. They built off of that. They brought in Rob Sims. They brought in Peterman. Forgive me. They did different things, right? They built off of Backus and Raiola when they could have easily upgraded that, right? But they didn't. They chose for years to build off of that. Do you build off that standard, which is like, I want to say average to below average, or do you get better? And what I mean by efficiency, this is what I'm saying. Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones, are they average, below average, or above average? And I'm going to say they're average. And that's on the offensive side of the ball. But when you go to Brad Holmes and what he had to build off of, Frank Ragnow, TJ Hockenson, DeAndre Swift, are they average, below average, above average? The foundations are totally different than what you had to build off of. So I'm not shooting Brad Holmes down for what he did. You take what you inherited. But at the same time, the fan, if they're going to credit him, they have to credit the one who he's building off of. Because Brad Holmes didn't do anything but just dot the I's across the T's. He just finishing up. He's just a finished carpenter. He just finishing it up. He's not structuring anything. Some people say like, well, Bob Quinn made a lot of bad picks and everything else. But when Bob Quinn inherited his team, offensively, we're speaking about, what did he have to build off of? First thing they say about Matthew Stafford, the reason why he wasn't successful, because he never had a tight end, never had an offensive line, he never had a run game. All right, I give you that. But that's based off what Mayhew did. When Mayhew drafted him, what did he give him? He went by what was built before him. He stuck behind Backus and Raiola for his offensive line. Bob Quinn, on the other hand, said that wasn't good enough, whatever else. I don't know if they retired by the time that I think they was let go. I think it was retired by that time. Yeah, because because Ragnar and TJ Lane came in. I don't know if Backus and Raiola was there still. I'm not sure how that works, but I guess I could look that up, but I'm not. In which way it go, I know he brought in Wagner, what's his name, based upon Cardwell's team, right? And Cardwell's team was based off of Quinn temporarily built off of Mayhew's team, but he saw that team wasn't good enough. I mean, the foundation that is. We're not talking about anything else. We're talking about this efficiency, whatever. Okay, now. And what I mean, of course, we're talking about with efficiency, we're talking about, is it average, below average, or above average? When we're talking about efficiency, we're grading it that way. Is it average, below average, or above average? That's what we're going to grade the efficiency on. And let's get to the defense side of the ball. When Quinn and Patricia inherit this team, he inherit, let's say, Slay, Quinn, Glover Quinn, and Ziggy Ansah, right? Are they average, below average, above average at their position? We're not talking about stats. We're talking about the impact of efficiency on the field. Or you could say in the locker room, you could say leadership, you could say all that. Now, this is what he has to build off of on his defense. Now, Brad Holmes, when he came in with Trey Flowers, Jamie Collins, and I want to say Okwara, but he was a free agent, so I don't think he had that to build off of. I'm not going to use that as much. But we're throwing Pennicini. But Pennicini is not really, he didn't have a long stint of something to grade off of. So even with that, you can grade it if he's efficient or not. Is if he's average, above average, or below average. But you have Trey and you have Jamie Collins. That's what you got to build off as your mainstays. When Bob Quinn took over, he had Slay, Quinn, Ziggy. Now I'm going to say that Slay, Quinn, and Ziggy were all average. They were all average. They were maybe above average when Ndamukong Suh was there. I believe you got your best play out of those three when Ndamukong Suh was there. So their leader was actually Ndamukong Suh more so than Stephen Tulloch or Vanden Bosch or anything else. Everything was built off Ndamukong Suh, off of his impact on the game, on the field. Everybody else was like average to below average. Ndamukong Suh was the only one that they had that was above average. And Ziggy, Glover Quinn, and Darius Slay were average to me. Were average. I don't give none of them top 10 in a position. I don't. I think they're highly overrated. And so what I'm saying is, what I'm saying by that is that according to my standard, of course, to another person's opinion, they may disagree. Of course, they arguably would. I don't believe Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia had anything to build off of. Now, if you were to tell me they had Ndamukong Suh to build off of, it's a totally different world. It's a totally different world. That's why Mayhew is considered a failure. You drafted Ndamukong Suh. He's successful based off the failure of, well, actually, that's his own failure. Because his second year, he get Ndamukong Suh. That's off his first year, he get Matthew Stafford. His second year, getting Ndamukong Suh. So that's off his own failure. So, and you get an impactful player that's getting double to triple teamed in Ndamukong Suh. Nobody's really game planning for Glover Quinn. Nobody's game planning for Ziggy. Nobody's game planning for Darius Slay. They're not. They're not game planning for them. They're not. They benefited off of Ndamukong Suh. They game planned off of Ndamukong Suh. That's why he was getting double and triple team. And over to Brad Holmes, nobody is double teaming. Well, let's say this way. Nobody's game planning Trey. Nobody's game planning Collins. Nobody's game planning Okwara or Pennicini, however you want to slice it. So he really didn't. Brad Holmes don't have really nothing to build off of, but we're going off what he has to build with. So in that draft, on the defense side of the ball, their first draft together, Bob Quinn, Patricia, they go with A'Shawn Robinson. that you have to build off of in the trenches and the defensive line. And but Brad Holmes, his first draft, he went with Levi Anzaruki and he went with Derek Barnes as the main two guys. But of course, you could say Aleem McNeil, I believe, is the guys the first two. But I'm gonna go with Barnes as those two, in my opinion. And the point of what I'm saying is that it's a whole lot easier to build off of something that's established. People say that Brad Holmes is a better GM. He haven't done anything. He haven't done anything. Things were in place for him to build off of. Can you build off of Trey Flowers? Yeah, you can. Can you build off of Jamie Collins? Yeah, you can. You know, and actually that's what they're doing. He did what? He got based upon what's already established here. Penny Sini is okay at the I can say point of attack, but you could say on the defensive line he's pretty much decent. Romeo Core, they Bob Quinn and brought in here, so he brought him back. The key addition they brought in was Brockers, and then you go into the draft, right? Those are the key additions. Brockers, and then you go into the draft. Bob Quinn had Darius Slay, Glover Quinn, and Ziggy Ansah. And if you want to throw in a DeAndre Diggs, you're talking about, in my opinion, you're talking about average to below average players. Now I think they're a bit overrated by playing in Detroit. It's like being on a team that is bad and you boosting up stats. You know, if you're on a bad team and you putting up, say like in basketball terms, and you're averaging 25 to 30 a game on a bad team, of course it's going to look like it's, as considered an accomplishment. But you're on a bad team, so who else is going to do it? Nobody else is putting up any points. You're taking up all the shots. It's only efficient if you're averaging 30 points and you have a low, a high field goal percentage. If you're shooting 50 plus field goal percentage, and you averaging 30, then you're efficient. If you're not, then the 30 points a game doesn't mean anything. You're just chucking up a lot of shots, and some of them goes in, some of them not. You're not efficient. That's the whole thing with the whole Jerry Stackhouse deal. He was getting you 30 points a game, but he wasn't efficient. So the team's not getting any better. So they had to do an addition with subtraction. So they let him. Excuse me. So they had to let Stafford. They had to let Stackhouse go for the sake of Rip Hamilton. Why? Because Rip Hamilton is more efficient. Stackhouse can get you 30 points a game, but he's not going to be efficient at doing it. And that's the same thing I say about Stafford. And in comparison to Goff, I only have one question. Is he efficient? Does he throw the ball on time? Not on time, forgive me. To the receiver, does he throw the ball in stride? Does he put a nice touch on the ball? Does he put it in a catchable position for the receiver? If he doesn't, he's no better than Stafford. I'd rather get a guy with less talent, but the guy who can actually put the ball where it's supposed to be. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same position again. And if I may say this, Matthew Stafford left this team 1 year too early. 1 year too early. Because the team that he left, or what his team that's assembling, is what he was actually made for. It's interesting because he may be going to a team that is like a mirror image of what the Lions team is becoming. Only thing about it, he's going to a team that's considered ready-made on one side of the ball. But if he were to have stayed, look at the offensive side of the ball. Look how easy of a job he would have to be with if he would have stayed. We're not talking about head coaching. We're not talking about none of that offensive scheme and nothing like that. We're talking about just the personnel, what he has to build off of. He will actually, for what he does, for what he, oh, but yeah, what he would be paid to do, he'd be in a better position to be in a Lions uniform than he would be with the Rams. However, I guess he's making a compensation of saying that is the trade is better. Of course, you're talking about a better living environment. You're talking about retirement. You're talking about possibly a team that is close to actually in contention because they've been in the playoffs and so forth. It's a little easier, but that's the defense side of the ball. The offense side of the ball is something entirely totally different. So, but anyway, that's my gripe with Stafford. I believe that he would, if he would have stayed, it's like equivalent to the Grant Hill situation. Grant Hill left 1 year too early. He left. The year he left, the Pistons, okay, the Pistons was going to bring in Ben Wallace on the mid level, regardless if they signed and traded him or not. That has worked out for that perspective. They was going into that to go in to sign in Ben Wallace that year. Of course, nobody knew hindsight, that how he's going to turn out. But Grant Hill, if he would have stayed, he would have inherited. Of course, he had Jerry Stackhouse another year, but he would have inherited Ben Wallace. So he'd have some help on, some help. I'm not saying Ben Wallace would have been efficient on offense, but you got something to build off of. And it's as equivalent to Matthew Stafford. They was almost ready to get done, and of course, Grant Hill look at it hindsight, he could say like, wow, if I would have stayed up under Joe Dumars, and it would have look at what it turned out. They got them a title in what the next 2 to 3 years after he left. I think it took 2 years. No, it took 3 years. 3 years. Because Carwell was here. No, forgive me, not Carwell. Carlisle was there for 2 years. Larry Brown came in the fourth year after he left. The first year was George Irvine. That was the year that he left. The off season. They played that out that one season. They was really bad. They was 32-50, from my understanding, and then they bring in Rick Carlisle. They go 50-32. That first year with Cliff Robinson, Michael Curry, Ben Wallace, and Stackhouse is the offense. Stackhouse, Cliff Robinson was the offense, along with Chucky Atkinson, Corliss Williamson. But your defense was Ben Wallace, Cliff Robinson, per se. So Grant Hill would have inherited that. Of course, you're talking about potentially having an opportunity at the time playing with Tim Duncan and Tracy McGrady. So I understand why he made the move. The same thing like I understand why Stafford wanted to leave to go to LA. Or the deal was made to go to LA, to agree to go to LA. Let me say it away. I can understand it. Look what you have to work with on that defense side of the ball. I don't know too much about the offense, but the defense side of the ball is pretty much what it is. When you got a guy like Aaron Donald and whoever else they got alongside him, whatever, you got a guy that you can build off of. So I can understand it from that perspective. And I believe the Rams were in the playoffs last year. If not, it was close to it. Oh, I don't know. But so I get it. But at the same time, Matthew Stafford as well as Grant Hill, they left a year too early. The way that this team is set this year up under Brad Holmes finishing off the deal, it's suited for Matthew Stafford. He's going to regret it. If they don't win a title this first year, better yet, not even say win a title, if they don't get to the Super Bowl his first year, he's going to regret it. And I'm willing to guarantee you this. The Lions will win a Super Bowl before let's say it this way: if the Rams don't get to the Super Bowl their first year with Stafford, the Lions will get to the Super Bowl if not win it before they do. I guarantee you that. Brad Holmes he's not a genius. I won't give him the title of a genius or even being a great GM because he haven't built up anything. And what I mean by building anything is that in my opinion, you got to do it in three phases. You got to close out the past, and you got to be in the present and build for the future. Now he's somewhat doing that, but he didn't close out the past because I guess you could say he sort of kind of deal with the Sewell pick. He closed it out by finishing it up, but he didn't have to tear down much of nothing. Most of those players was on it. They was expendable to some degree. Those players that was waived or cut or, all that good stuff. Yeah, they was expendable to that degree. So I guess you could say that he closed out the pass with that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to try to make him like a bad guy because in defense of Bob Quinn, he's I want to say he's making the right decisions based off of what he has to was on the table. I won't give him efficiency yet because he haven't built anything. Now the team is going from bad to good. Now to take it from good to get it from good to great or get it in the good department or the good section is where you're going to show his efficiency. But I believe I would say this though. He did this draft on the defense side of the ball, which is what arguably he had only thing to work with. I mean, the only thing that's of necessity, more so than drafting a receiver. You got TJ Hockenson and you got DeAndre Swift. You don't have to give me skill positions per se. Just make the offensive line efficient, and I could throw the ball with TJ Hockenson. By TJ Hockenson being an All Pro, and I'm going on a limb saying he's an All Pro. He's a Pro Bowler already, but he's an All Pro soon this coming year. Barring injury or anything like that, any setbacks. When you have a guy like him to build off of, and DeAndre Swift is no slouch. He's no Barry Sanders, but I give him a more so a Emmitt Smith, Thurman Thomas type. You could do a lot more with him than you could with Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders his game is off, I want to say improvising. He's good at that. So that's a trait of, I guess you could say, that you can't even coach or whatever case may be. That instinct is just off the charts. However, I don't believe you can win as much. It's like Barry Sanders is like Calvin Johnson. I don't know if you can win with that, as much as you could with the Jerry Rice. I don't know if you can win with Randy Moss per se. People say, look at their stats and everything else. I get that. But in terms of winning, stats are stats. All right, I get that. But winning is a different caliber. It's a different level. You could win with Jerry Rice wherever he goes. You can win with him. Because he's just that. He's an impactful player where it's not solely about him, but he's more than enough to build off of. Barry Sanders, I believe the offense was solely about him. The offense went as he went. And that's a hard deal. That's a lot of responsibility to put on one guy, particularly when the offensive line is very spotty. And people say they had Kevin Glover, they could say they had Lomas Brown, and that offensive line was atrocious. It was no better. Of course, Tony Lomas Brown and Danny Glover. Kevin Glover was Pro Bowlers and a time when Pro Bowl was pretty much efficient or something to talk about. Getting still, in my opinion, they was probably a little step higher than Backus and Raiola. Now, don't get me wrong, Backus and Raiola never sniffed around Pro Bowl at all. And for Lomas and Glover to be Pro Bowlers, that's a pretty high feat at a time where it was considered a big deal. So I give them a step. I would say they was above average at that point, but their career wasn't that way. They wasn't Pro Bowlers every year. You didn't pencil Lomas Brown as a Pro Bowler at the left tackle. You didn't pencil Kevin Glover every year as a Pro Bowler at starting center. So, but what's coming to say about Ragnow, you're going to pretty much pencil him as a starting center, as a Pro Bowler like every year. And Taylor Decker is coming to that end where he's coming to be a Pro Bowler, to be that efficient, that level starter. That is one heck of a compliment to Ragnow. But anyway, with that being said, you have more to build off what Bob Quinn did than you do what Brad Holmes has done. Brad Holmes, he did what he's supposed to have did. He filled in the blanks. He didn't do anything. He didn't do any more or any less than what he should have done. He built up the defensive side of the ball, where the defensive side of the ball was lacking. But he took the no-brainer deal. The only thing in my opinion, only thing he had to do was not mess up the completion. If Sewell fell to them, which he did at 7, it's a no-brainer you take him. He's the best player on the board. He is the best player at his position on the board. And he's the player of need on your personal team to fill a spot. He's of necessity. So you take him. I don't give him kudos for taking it. That just it's not rocket science with that. You just take it's right there in front of you. Take it. That's not like taking Isaiah Simmons and number 3. There's no way I'm taking Isaiah Simmons at number 3. He's talented, but it's too much of a gamble. It's not a sure thing. Now, if you were talking about getting Becton or somebody like that in the draft, or a Wirfs or something like that, then okay, you're talking about something different. But I believe at the time, the offensive line, they thought it was in a better position. It was in a position that it didn't have to add anything else to it. Okay, you're going with Taylor Decker, he believed in. That's a guy he drafted. And then you have Ragnow, that's a guy he drafted. Then you brought in as a free agent, Halapoulivaati Vitae, and then you draft Jonah Jackson and so forth, and all that. But you're going to roll with what you have. So could he have made the offensive line, that much of a better deal instead of getting Okudah and going after the offensive line? Yeah, he very well could have. Yet and still, Okudah was the best player at his position on the board, and people may argue with that and say he's not. I disagree. I say he was the best player at his position on the board, and it was a position of need. So you take it. Isaiah Simmons wasn't the best player on the board at a position of need. Well, you could say he was a safety. You could say he was a linebacker. He was a hybrid player. You could put him in different places. That's not. You got to take into consideration what kind of atmosphere that you're going up under Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. Is it a flexible or is a set type system? They are a set type system. So they get a guy they want a guy to do their very specific job. Even if their job is to wear 10 hats, they want you to do a very specific job. Versus maybe with Brad Holmes and Lynn and Glenn, maybe they're not Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell and Lynn and Glenn, maybe they're a little bit more flexible of their system. So it's best player available. That the guy can wear 10 hats, but he's not what's that, pigeonhole, however the saying goes. So you can, I don't know, their foundations and their approach is contrary to one to another. But I'm looking at what Brad Holmes have to build off of. That offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball. The defense, he did a lot more work, right? And he could build. He's actually doing an outstanding job on the defense side of the ball. I would give him credit for that. I'm not talking about the Brockers pick. I'm talking about the draft. The safety slash cornerback, the linebacker, and the two defensive linemen. I love those picks. I absolutely love those picks. Their impact on the field is actually going to revive this whole defense. Those four players is actually going to impact the whole. Their impact is going to be more influential than Dan Campbell impact will be. People talking about Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell. People want to play for them. I get that. Now, that only going to go so far. That's like playing for Wayne Fontes. They only going to go so far. Wayne Fontes couldn't get you a Super Bowl. He couldn't get you past. He couldn't get you to be consistent because of that. Playing for a guy you like only can get you so far. Playing for a guy who is who constantly grows and constantly expands and constantly just gather more information versus being content. You can win with that. That's where you get the guys like Bill Walsh or Bill Belichick. They're students of the game. They constantly doing things to evolve, constantly. And even when we want to go to basketball terms, you could say Greg Popovich. They constantly learn more. Those guys are very unusual as coaches. That's why they're the best at what they do, because they're constantly innovative. They're not stuck on what they know, which was Patricia's downfall. What he knew wasn't battle tested for number one, and number two, he didn't want to evolve anymore. He thought what he knew was enough, so that was it. But anyway, and that's where his arrogance got the best of him. Well, I'm going to say this with Dan Campbell, that what he has with people talking about they want to play for him, that only going to go so far. But those players that Brad Holmes brought here on the defense side of the ball is going to change the culture of this entire defense. Those four players, Levy, I think his name is McNeil, the defensive tackle, Derek Barnes, and Iffy. I'm going to get his name. I get that. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm going to get it. The safety, the linebacker, and the two defensive tackles are actually going to change the whole culture of the defense. They're going to bring Jeff Okudah alive. They're going to bring Jelani Tavai alive if they don't trade him or don't cut him. And they're going to bring Jamie Collins alive. Those four players is actually going to re-energize the team more so than Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell may give you an environment that he's a player's coach, but that only goes so far. A player coach only goes so far. You have to be innovative. You can't be a player's coach. You got to have structure. Look at the great ones. You're talking about Bill Parcells. You're talking about Bill Belichick. These are teams that's in constant contention. Head coach that's in constant contentions year in, year out, year in, year out. With that being said, Lions fans, I'm going to close this out. Salute.